All right. Hello again. Welcome back to Building Your World, the commercial real estate development and investment podcast. My name is Nicholas Long, and I'm joined again by Will Ellis, but unfortunately not McKay Brabham. However, we are joined by a very special guest, our good friend, Kevin Hann, who will be introduced in just a minute. First, a few housekeeping items. You can now reach us at contact@bywpodcast.com with any questions, feedback, or suggestions for future episodes. Don't forget, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube with plans to expand to even more platforms soon. But obviously, if you're tuning in today, I know that you found us on one of the three that I've mentioned. Today, we are joined by a fantastic guest, Kevin Hann. Kevin has had an incredible journey in the commercial real estate world so far. He grew up in DC, was educated in Florida, started his career in brokerage with Avison Young in Denver, and is now here making waves in the Southeast. He came back to the East Coast to join RCB Development as the director of leasing before ultimately making the decision to start his own company. He's the co-founder of the Stono Group, specializing in acquiring and developing industrial and retail assets with a focus on value add and opportunistic strategies. We'll be talking about his career, the state of the market, and what it takes to succeed in this dynamic industry.
Love it.
All right, what's going on, Will? We haven't talked in a while. What are you up to? What's new with you?
Getting things done in mountain towns across the West. It's been pretty
How many
exciting.
projects are you working on?
We're wrapping up one, and we just had an interview for what will hopefully be the next one a couple hours ago.
Yeah.
That all went well.
Can you loop Kevin in on a little bit of kind of what you're doing nowadays? I'm not sure if he's up to date.
Do you remember? This is for a broad audience, but do you remember at all from DC?
Why does that name ring a bell? I can't put a face to the name. Who is it?
This guy's tech. He's got, I believe it. He's got a
Yes, that is cool. Very cool.
So he's still on the East Coast, but me and three guys are out here, and we found these specialized deals working for mountain communities. So we're doing it all modularly, which is kind of the best approach out here. There's no workforce. There are no qualified subs that live anywhere within 2.5 hours.
Right.
So we get everything built in like Boise, Idaho, and we ship it ice road trucking style out here, and then use a big ass crane to set it all on the foundations, which are handled by our general contracting partner.
No way. Very cool.
So mix of for sale, rental stuff. But this last project we just wrapped up was all for sale condos and townhomes. We've got one left to sell, but I think we should be closing on that one here pretty soon before the
That's
end of the
very
year.
cool. How did you get into that asset class? I mean, is that something that you were involved in DC?
Not at all. I was doing hotel development in South Carolina, and then I was going to take another job, and reached out. So he pitched me on the idea of coming out here and being part ski bum, part real estate developer.
Tough sell. Tough sell.
Yeah, that's great, man. Yeah, so the big thing, Kev, about Will, what's cool, it's just cool picking his brain about it, but they do a lot of modular construction, which is obviously a topic that's totally foreign to us here. But I wanted to see if you saw this, Will. Where was it? I just read this article. Graystar, they just got done with their first big modular apartment complex up in Pennsylvania, 312 unit. Did you see that?
I did not see that.
Yeah, it's their first big jump into modular construction. So
So what's the difference between modular and multifamily and like modular townhomes, because like townhomes are side by side, right? So I can visualize that. But when you've got like is Graystar building just squares within a square and then just stacking them on top of each other?
Yeah, so like the stairwells, those will be one mod, and then you'll have like the living room of an apartment unit that'll go next to it. And then you have next to that mod is like would be your like entryway, bathroom, and like bedroom for
So is modular multifamily a common thing nowadays, or is it new?
I think it's up and coming from what it looks like.
it's been around for a while, but it's tricky to pull off just because of the way the layouts work. You got to find an
Yeah.
architect who's familiar with what your constraints are because you got to get them on a truck and you got to ship them.
Well,
So
I'm sure that like the floor layouts are restricted as well. I mean, you can't get all that creative.
That's
Again,
right.
I have no idea. I, I
No,
I I
yeah,
didn't know it was a thing.
I think you're right. I'm looking at a picture here. I wish I could share this screen with you guys, but I'm watching it. It's crazy. It looks like a bunch of shipping containers made out of wood stacked on top of each other pretty much. And
that's
then with
it.
like a truss system on top.
Yeah,
That's pretty much it.
and you can ship the mods with the roofs like partly installed. So when they show up, they just tilt them up, make those final last structural connections, and then throw on the sheeting. There's a lot of different things you can do.
I'm sure. And all the insulation, all the electrical work is done on site.
It's done in the factory, but they'll you can do it two ways. You can leave the circuits long and have them land them at the panel in the field, or you can wire the panel and then wire the rest of the unit and then leave an access in the ceiling where you just plug and play the circuits, which is the easiest way to go about that.
I want to dig into that when we get off this call, just because
Yeah,
it's a new concept to me. And then again, Will, like and you'll find this out as we keep talking, but I'm on the industrial side of things, and it's a box, right?
that's
And
right.
there's some creativity to it, but I don't know anything about the modular development space. So
Right. Looks like Legos.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
All
for
right.
very
sure.
complicated Legos.
Yeah, that's right. Glad to hear things are going well with you, Will. Let's talk to Kevin. So, Kevin, welcome to the show, man. We've been talking about this for a while. Glad you could join. I really appreciate you jumping on. Oh, I forgot to mention this. I heard. Are you guys expecting your first?
We are, yeah.
Oh, congrats, man. We didn't even talk about
Thank
that
you.
before. That's
No, I
awesome.
appreciate that. Yeah, no, it's
You
very
know if it's a
exciting.
girl or a
So
boy?
now we're waiting.
Okay,
So
that's awesome.
we're gonna do the whole surprise thing, and we're getting the nursery, I guess, built out. I say built out. We're not really building anything, but we cleaned out a room and have put a crib in there and stuff like that. And it's starting to get real. Life is getting
Yeah.
real.
No doubt. Well, that's pretty awesome. Well, cool. Let's jump into it. Let's start getting to know you a little bit better. Can you walk us through the career journey that I mentioned briefly at the start of this podcast? Can you kind of tell us, what your background is and why you chose real estate, and then maybe we'll work down to eventually what kind of catalyzed you to start business, start this business on your own.
For sure. So I guess we'll take a couple steps back towards where I grew up. So I grew up outside the DC area near Will in Potomac, Maryland, and went to high school there. I went to college in Florida, at Florida State for 2 years, and then I transferred to University of North Florida in Jacksonville. And I graduated from there with a Bachelor of Arts in Finance. And then the day after that, I pretty much moved to Colorado. I found a job in tech sales, and just to kind of fund my life, right? So I kind of found the first job I could find out there, and I'm really grateful for that one job, because if anybody or if any of you have ever been in tech sales, I mean, you're in a cube and you're making 100 cold calls a day, and you learn how to get told no and kind of get numb to it, and learn to take objections and how to handle them and stuff like that. So although it was not a fancy start to my career and a lot of boring days, I do not regret it. And a lot of, I would say, the skill sets I have now do stem from that experience. So did that for about 2 years. And to kind of take a step back again, when I was in DC, I grew up, a mentor of mine in real estate is a close friend of mine. I grew up around him and other family friends who were in real estate development. And I I liked the lifestyle. Obviously, it can bring a tremendous amount of wealth as well. And I just saw the balance of that. And I said, one day I want to do that. I didn't know that I wanted to do that necessarily. It was kind of the first thing that I was exposed to. My dad was a contractor. I didn't really know a ton about what he did. And just because he separated family from business, which I think was a great idea at the time, but I didn't know much about what he did. So being in the contracting industry was not something I was interested in. I didn't know about it. And so I knew about the real estate a little bit and it interested me. And so long story short, I'm in tech sales in Colorado. I'm like, you know what? I want to get into real estate. I've always wanted to do it, and there's no better time than now. So I quit my job, and I found a position in brokerage as an industrial broker. And then I did that for about 2.5 years, 3 years, and then got a call from a relationship of mine in Charleston to see if I'd come work for them to run their leasing and help out with acquisitions and stuff like that for a real estate developer, an industrial developer here in Charleston. So did that for about a year and a half, and then broke off on my own to start Stono Group.
Yeah, it's been exciting. I think I met you probably, I think when you first moved here, started with RCB, and yeah, it's been exciting to watch you kind of make the transition, and start up the Stono Group. Something that I admire deeply. Wanted to ask you about asset classes. Obviously, you've worked at this point your entire career pretty much in industrial. I understand the Stono Group is starting to branch into retail a bit, and that's you guys have kind of hopes to do basically some ground up retail development along with maybe value add kind of turnaround of industrial property, small bay stuff. And yeah, just wanted to kind of hear, when you were transitioning into real estate, were you thinking about what asset class you wanted to be in on the back end? Obviously, this was pre 2020 when industrial didn't seem so attractive, right?
Yeah.
Just wanted to kind of hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. I know I got lucky. I was so when I was interviewing with a ton of the brokerage firms in Denver, by coincidence, I was just interviewing with a bunch of the office teams, like office agency teams. And that was just because my only perception really of real estate was office space. That if you don't know much about real estate, you think office space. At least I did. So that's all I was interviewing for. And then I interviewed with like this one team at JLL like 11 times. The same team, I'd go back and back, and then another team like 10 times. And that was at AY, and they actually gave me an assignment. I had to go find. They gave me 3 businesses, a small, medium, and large business in Denver, and said, go find out who the decision maker is, when their lease expiration is up, and what their plans are. And I had never been in real estate before, ever. So I had no idea how to do that. I was walking into doors and being like, hey guys, I'm interviewing for a job, and I was told to find out all this information about you. Like, whether you lie to me or not, can you just help me out here? And so I did it for these 3 companies. I ended up submitting it to the managing director, and he comes back to me and he's like, our brokers have been trying to get this information for the last 3 years. Like, how the hell did you do this? And I was like, I have no idea. So, and I was actually interviewing to get into a research role because I thought that getting into research was the most important thing. So that when I would get into brokerage, I would already have knowledge of the market and the lingo and all that stuff. So I was trying to be a research coordinator. They gave me an assignment that was more related to brokerage. And the guy goes, we're not hiring you for research. We're hiring you for brokerage. Oh, and by the way, the only part of our team that's hiring right now is the industrial team. And so I was like, sure, let's do it. And that's essentially how I got into industrial. And boy, am I happy that I did that for many reasons. Obviously, the market has, industrial has benefited from the market itself and vice versa. And
Right.
It's also more of my personality, right? Like I wear boots and jeans and button-down shirts, and I'll dress up when I have to, but that's just not my personality to be in a suit and tie every day. And I was a tenant rep broker representing manufacturers in Colorado. And so I would go into all these manufacturing facilities and just see how things were made. And like, for example, when you walk down the aisle at the grocery store and you pick up Kraft mac and cheese or whatever, right? You never really think about how it's made or how it's produced. Like, there's no reason to think about that. But
Right.
then you go into a facility and you see, it goes from this to this to this to this, and the different processes and stuff like that. And it's really interesting, and it gets you thinking about things you never thought about before. So that was a really cool aspect of getting into industrial and learning about that. And so essentially that's how I got into it, just kind of out of luck. And then I wanted to remain into it because I enjoyed it. And then when my industrial developer buddy, at RCB said, would you consider working for us? I'd always wanted to be on the development side. It was tough to leave brokerage because I loved brokerage and I was starting to build relationships and starting to make money and stuff like that. So it was tough to leave, but it was a good transition for my life. So I don't know if I've rambled on too long for you, but that's essentially how I got into it, just by kind of pure luck.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect response. That's, it's cool to hear that from the beginning. You mentioned something I wanted to circle back to. And one of the things that kind of captivated me when we're having our first conversations, this was kind of fresh after you had transitioned from brokerage and were working here in the Southeast. You mentioned that on your team, when you were working as an industrial broker in Colorado, you made the decision to specialize, right? You said that you were going to go out and learn everything that you could about manufacturing so that you were the best person to deal with manufacturing companies as a tenant rep in Colorado, right? So, when I hear that, I think, man, that's like a super mature decision for a mid-20s, mid-20-year-old person to make. Did you have a mentor advising you to do so? How did you choose to specialize? And you said, you know what? If I'm going to be doing this, I'm going to be great at it, and I'm going to pick manufacturing, and I'm going to know everything about it, to where when you're a manufacturing company looking for space in Colorado, I want to be the guy that you call. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yeah, good question. I'm trying to think of a mentor or somebody that was chirping in my ear about specializing. I can't think of anybody, but I have grown to learn, and I have a strong belief in specializing. Just in any sales role, whether it's real estate related or not, if you are the guy for a specific topic, you bring so much credibility to the table, right? And when you go into a conversation and you know more about a specific topic than somebody else, you develop trust with the person at the other end of the table very quickly, right? So I don't know where I learned that from, but I did learn it, and I thought about that, like you had said, when I got into industrial real estate. I got to give credit to my old partner who put me onto this online subscription service that wrote an article about manufacturers like once a week in Colorado. And in the article, it said this manufacturer has this many employees. These are their wants, or the issues they're having right now, their needs right now, and then another, like a third topic. And I'm telling you, 25% of the time it said we need more space, literally. So what I did, my first like 2 weeks being in the office was so boring. I went into that whole database in their website, and I created an Excel spreadsheet for every article that had been written on that database, and it was like however many hundreds of articles. And I went through every article and I copied and pasted the whole article into the Excel spreadsheet. And it was the ugliest spreadsheet you've ever. The cells were so spaced apart. It was wild. It was incredibly inefficient. But anyways, just so that when I was cold calling, I could go over to the notes, which was the article, and then look at the need and say, oh, you guys mentioned you either need more space, or your desire is to bring an extra manufacturing line on, and if you do that, you'll probably end up needing more space because it's going to take up more space in your warehouse, right?
Right.
So, or you guys want to grow your employee count. Well, having more employees means more space, right? That was pre remote work. So that's what I did. And actually, my partner at the time, I don't blame her for this, but she said, I'd rather just go after every industrial user. And I was like, you know what? No, I know what it means to specialize and kind of brand myself as the manufacturing specialist. Because when I cold call somebody and I say, "Hey, listen, I only focus on manufacturers. I helped your neighbor relocate their manufacturing facility, and I got relationships with contractors because you're going to need heavier power. You need reinforced concrete because your equipment is 50,000 pounds. All this stuff. And even if other brokers can do that, which they could, fine. But like, it made me sound more credible."
Right.
And that was my thought process. And who knows if that's why I won business, but that was my thought process.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just, again, like, it's interesting to hear that, the young version of you still had, the wherewithal, or you almost had the wisdom in a sense to be able to go, hey, this is where I'm going to specialize. I feel like a lot of young people are kind of just reaching and trying and grabbing for kind of anything that sticks, right? And they kind of settle into a niche or a specialization after time, whereas you kind of on the front end sought out one. It was super cool to hear the first time I heard it. It just sounds like a smart, mature decision.
Well, I think part of it did come from the tech sales side of things because like the company I worked for, we did one thing. Okay. And when I cold called somebody, I could tell them what I did in 5 seconds. And it was just simple and concise. And we were specialized at that one thing, right? As opposed to doing a bunch of different things. So it just, again, it created credibility with the end user because, like, when you're hiring somebody to do work on your house, you don't want a lawn maintenance, you don't want like a general lawn maintenance guy who can swing a hammer and also pour some concrete to do your work. Like, you want a kitchen specialist, right?
Right.
And it might cost you more, but at the end of the day, you're comfortable with the expertise you're getting, and you're willing to give that guy an extra 5 seconds in conversation during a sales pitch, right? So I knew that about sales, and I just applied it to industrial real estate. I chose manufacturing. Coincidentally, Colorado was a heavier manufacturing state. So there's a lot of manufacturing in the area, even though it's incredibly expensive to manufacture in Colorado. So it's funny that it's a heavy manufacturing area, but that's what it was. And I got introduced to it, and I went to all the manufacturing events, and that was my brand. So
that's pretty cool. Yeah, it sounds like, you said the difference there is like, it might cost a little more, but I think that's the difference between value and price, right?
Right. And not being a commodity.
Right.
Right. I mean, and that's a big thing in real estate too, especially in brokerage. There's so many brokers out there. Everyone's negotiating fees all the time. And, you gotta know what you're talking about, and to be able to stand up for yourself when you're negotiating certain terms. And I've made a fool of myself. I've said the wrong things. I've acted like I was smarter than I was, and I got humbled pretty quick and put in my place. But it's just what happens.
That's right. You're providing a value. You're not providing a price, which I think is the difference between the most sophisticated and best brokers on the scene, and some of the ones that will probably end up washing out of the industry in
Right.
a couple of years, right?
Right.
Well, that's great to hear. Thanks for shedding some light on that. Will, am I cutting you off? Do you have anything to add?
This is a Kevin-centric pod. I love it.
Yeah, it's good, man.
I think the last time
Keep them talking.
Will, I think the last time you and I saw each other, we were fly fishing on for
That checks
largemouth
out.
bass.
I got a whole photo album on my phone. It's just golf fish.
Dude, if you go, you know how you can go to the albums on your phone, right, for your photos, and you can actually look at the map. The amount of photos I have on is hysterical.
All right. Well, let's just stay on this topic for a second. I wanted to talk about kind of where you're specializing now. It sounds like you've tried to be a specialist your entire career, and now you're leading a development company. So how does specialization versus generalization factor into your business? Obviously, when you think about developers, they're generally, they have to be generalized people to some extent, right? Like you got to know a little bit about engineering, a little bit about architecture, a little bit about construction, and a little bit about deal making and financing
Right.
and everything.
Right.
Wanted to hear, how you're kind of fitting in your specialist mentality into that, how you plan on hiring people around you to compensate for what you're lacking maybe, or what you're leaning on. Could you dive into that for us?
For sure. So I guess ever since I left Colorado, I've become less specialized in the manufacturing thing because and I went to go work for an industrial developer, and the majority of our tenants were not in the manufacturing side of things. Right? They were service providers, plumbers, stuff like that. And so um, I guess I moved away from that part, but I am still solely on the industrial side now. My partner, his background is in retail, and more specifically, for the most part, single tenant net lease built to suits. So think
Yeah.
of like Family Dollars, or like ground leases for McDonald's or
Jiffy
building
Lube.
Verizon stores, stuff like that. Yeah, all that stuff. So
Yeah.
that's his background. And when we teamed up, you know, he of course he wanted to go retail. That's what he knows, and he knows it very well. But I don't know it at all. And it's really important to understand the leasing and the tenant, of the asset type you're going after to be successful. I mean, it's one of the most important things. And I don't know retail like he does, right? But he knows construction, he knows development, he knows entitlement. And if you can entitle a mixed use development with a bunch of single tenant net lease built to suits and some strip malls, right? Then you can retrofit a warehouse. So
Right.
I said, okay, listen, you've got this skill set that's transferable over to industrial. Let's go chase after some industrial assets. Okay. Figure out our mojo, how we work together. And then once we get, our feet off the ground and hopefully, find success in a few deals, then we can go over to the retail side. But I need to learn the retail side. So that's going to be something new for me. I'm already starting to learn it a bit, but we're still very much in the first inning of what we're doing. We're under contract for our first property. We're hopefully soon to be under contract for our second property and chasing a third and a fourth. So we're getting there. But that's the overall plan, is to stay in industrial and then eventually go into some retail aspect. Again, the specialization thing, that's my partner's specialty. It's what he knows. That's all he's done. So I trust his judgment on the retail side, like he trusts my judgment on the industrial side.
On the retail side, are you thinking triple net deals, single tenant stuff?
Yeah, I mean, his background's in those built to suits, right? So he understands it, and like he's built however many Family Dollars, and we know exactly what a Family Dollar costs and the troubles that we're going to have. And he's done a bunch of rezonings too, which is really tough to do. I mean, you go knock on doors of residents around you and convince them that it's good for the community and stuff like that. And so he's got that skill set. It is ground up development, so it's riskier, right? And it's very, very cap rate driven. You're building to a 7 yield. You hope you can exit at a 5.5. And if cap rates rise, man, you're either making no money or you're losing it, right? So
Yeah.
it's all real estate. You can make money and you can lose it, and it's a risk reward thing and taking calculated risks. And eventually we'll get there, because again, he's got that skill set. I'm like, hey man, we're in the first inning of this thing. Let's not lose our ass on our first deal, right?
Right.
Let's establish ourselves. Let's learn how we work together, what our hot buttons are, and then once we get really comfortable with our partnership and what we're doing, and hopefully making money at that time, then we can look at the retail stuff and go from there. The problem is I can't evaluate the risk as well because I don't know it, right? So I'm just leaning on him for that. So we want to get to a point where we're both adding value to both asset classes.
Right. Yeah, it sounds like, and I'm reminded of actually a professor that I had that said, your first deal cannot fail because then you'll have trouble raising capital ever again. And
Yeah,
that kind
yeah.
of that kind of sticks with me. So yeah, it sounds like, you're taking a calculated risk, looking for the base hits. Another quote, funny enough, I just heard it today on a podcast, was it was basically a guy said, a good artist needs to be able to give their art away for free for some time, right before it's valuable. And so I was thinking about that. If you're trying to get a deal going, you're trying to land your first deal. I mean, you might be willing to take a haircut, just to give your investors a solid return, just to be able
Right.
to get the wheels on the ship. So
For sure. It's, I mean, at the end of the day, we do deals for our investors, right? Of course, we have to make money as a company, but like when we're underwriting deals and we're passing on deals, it's because it doesn't make the investors enough money, right? That's essentially why. And like you can always look at, if a deal's thin, or to your point, doing something for less because it's your first couple, taking out the fees and stuff. But the fees are nothing to the whole deal.
that's right.
They really are nothing to the whole deal. And when you look at removing your yield, goes up by 0.01, and you're like, okay, we're still not doing the deal, even if I get paid nothing, right?
Right.
But yes, I do agree. I mean, I'm on the same side of things, like, build a reputation and stuff like that. And so that people trust you, you've got more leverage, all those reasons.
Right. Sounds like you've always had a down the road view. You're kind of looking towards the future instead of the right now, which is the right mentality to have, I think. So that's pretty cool to
Yeah,
hear.
I would say that's another thing that's benefited me, because I have always had a long-term view of things.
Right.
I've always been taught to, like, and I'll give credit to like my dad, put money in the mutual fund and like forget about it. Forget about it. The same concept. Just look at the long-term view, and how your actions now going to influence the future. And maybe to my detriment, maybe I focus too much on the future, and that affects me, in the moment. So I'm sure there's a downside to it. But I have always felt that way, and I've always thought about how certain things that happen now are going to, impact the future. So
Great. Yeah, well, let's open it up for a general conversation. Kind of wanted to talk about the current state of the market, kind of what we're all seeing here, and just talk about, like, where we are in the market cycle, or what trends we're noticing. What are you thinking, Kevin? Where do you think we are in the market cycle of real estate? I know that it's very fragmented, and the southeast markets that you're targeting are probably pretty healthy and strong. But if you have a general overview in mind, what would that be?
yeah, it's funny. I think it's a really tough question to answer, because I do think it's market by market.
Hmm.
And because if you look at like the macro economy as an example, like, knock on wood, according to like GDP growth, for example, maybe we've had a recession in 2020 during COVID or just after that, right? But like nobody really felt it. Everything, people were making more money and they were spending more money, right? So,
Right.
and then, for example, industrial boom. So like you have this conflict between like what some data is showing and then how people are actually reacting to it. And so all to say, like, there hasn't been, other than with office, there hasn't been a downturn for quite some time, which is scary for everybody, because you're like, okay, it's lingering. If you look at the last 100 years, on average, it's every 10 years, as an example. So you're like, and we're past that 10-year mark. So you're like, when is it going to happen? But it hasn't happened. And it's actually kind of, hopefully restarting right now, and another upswing now that interest rates have dropped. This election has occurred, and people are, have a positive view of the future in regards to economic impact, right?
Right.
And which conflicts with the whole every 10 years is a recession, right? So, and I'm not an economist. I don't even want to go into that conversation, because I'm going to make myself sound dumber than I am. Um, but anyways, in our sub market, or in our market in the southeast, and specifically at Greenville, where we're pursuing deals, uh, things seem to be pretty hot, and especially if you're within a specific sub market, right? You're at the intersection of two primary corridors, and the rent growth within a quarter mile of there has been like 30% year over year. I mean that, and then you look like 8 miles down the road, and the rents are staying stagnant or grown maybe 1% a year, 2% a year for the last 4 years. And so, but that's only 8 miles down the road, right? So it's you're so hyper focused on specific location. You know, the whole real estate saying location, location, location. It is very true. It
Right.
is so true. So I don't know if that answered your question about the development cycle and where we are. I'm not the best person to answer that question.
No, yeah.
I'm just hoping for the for the best. And I think there, at least for 2025, there's a positive outlook for what's going to happen.
Yeah. Basically what I'm hearing is focus on, strong markets and sub markets, which, kind of going back to the basic fundamentals of real estate investment, it sounds like, people should get back to focusing on the right things. Something that we've noticed is like it seems to be that everyone is just looking at a property and packing square footage onto it instead of thinking like, how can I get the most value for the largest tenant set if it's a spec build, right?
For
So
sure.
yeah, what I'm hearing there is, hey, focus on real estate fundamentals and stop worrying about macroeconomics. And
But 1,000%, I echo that big
yeah,
time, right?
yeah,
Because to your point, some people try to pack pack density and increase NOI, but then first of all, you're going to have trouble leasing it up because there's no circulation for the trucks to come in. There's not enough parking, et cetera, et cetera. When then
right.
you can't get it leased up, and then the investor that buys you out is going to recognize all that stuff. Now you're selling at a higher exit cap than you underwrote, right? So
That's right.
fundamentals are huge. And it's funny, I'm kind of educating my partner on that because he's not an industrial specialist.
Right.
And so I'm like, hey, we got to have this kind of truck court, this kind of clear height, this kind of loading, and this configuration has to be like this. And we could go buy something less desirable, but we need to underwrite 1.5 years of lease up because it's going to sit there for a while,
Right.
right? So I'm being kind of picky about the opportunities that we go after. To your point, your first couple deals have to be, a couple base hits,
They have to
right?
work. Yeah.
They have to work, and so I'm certainly being picky about that.
No, that's great. Yeah.
For a lacrosse guy, you've been all over the baseball references today, baseball
You know,
analogies.
it's funny. You know what? I was a JV lacrosse guy. Okay, so take that for what it is. And
Yeah.
I quit senior year to go snowboard. So
That's great. I wanted to tie it back real quick. Just, to your point of pickiness, I think all that you're saying there, no matter the asset class that we're talking about, just focusing on the fundamentals and basically really just focusing on the tenant, right? That's what sets the difference between, the successful and the amateur developer or the successful and the amateur investor. And I think that, as far as trends go, if we're discussing trends, something that I've seen is obviously the popularity of investing in single family residential has grown tenfold in the last 10 years, and it's just blown up, right? And each year it seems like there's more shows about flipping houses, there's more attention on it, right? And what I've noticed is that there are, players that are in single family residential that are sophisticated. They understand, they're smart folks. They understand how to invest, right? And those people look at how flooded that market has become with investors, and they're kind of leaking into the commercial space, right? And I think that these are the people that ultimately, if they don't come in and learn the commercial fundamentals or the industrial fundamentals, whatever it is, for whatever asset class they're in, these are the people that tend to wash out of it, right? Because they don't look at the real estate fundamentals or what the tenant needs. They just say, hey, my buddy bought a pretty successful metal building over there. Maybe I'll do that on this one. It seems like a great deal, buying it for under $100 a foot for a 5,000 square foot building. And they're just not looking at, oh man, this thing only has a, I don't know, 10-foot door and it has
right.
one of them and I got to cut new ones in and, it's in a bad location, and so I think that's cool to hear. It definitely sounds like you're bringing more of a tenant focus or real estate fundamental focus onto
Well,
the stuff you're looking to invest
and
in.
I was a tenant rep, right? So I represented tenants, and all the time I would hear why my clients were passing on certain buildings. I mean, it was important.
Right.
They wanted a dock high door, they wanted a drive-in door, they wanted at least 16-foot clear. They wanted 10% office, and they needed parking for 30 people. I heard that time and time and time again, and it got drilled into my brain. And then I went to the developer side where I understood, I learned about the investment side of things.
Right.
And it's funny, you mentioned the single family thing. So I've actually been talking about this recently quite a bit for some reason. It's so funny. Everyone says that's how you get into real estate is just buying a second home, which is not a bad entry point, right? Barrier to entry is lower. The cost is less. The upfront cost is less. So I understand why people do it. But I don't know if this is true, but my guess is 95% of people who do it are not tracking. First of all, they don't know how to underwrite, and they're not tracking their numbers. And I bet you so many of them are making 3% on their money every year because of
Right.
all the HVAC improvements, the roof improvements, all that stuff. You got, it's just single family. I don't own any single family. I also don't understand it all that well. So I'm probably out of place talking about this, but I, it'd be tough to convince me that a lot of these single family guys are making more than 4% a year on their money or whatever.
Right. Right.
And I'm like, keep your money in the stock market. You guys, you're only cash flowing however many $100 a month on this, and you just spent 15 grand on an HVAC unit. You didn't sell it for that much more, and
Right.
yeah, you got the the tax deductions or write-offs or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, tell me I'm wrong.
No, it makes what you're saying makes sense to me. And it seems like it seems like at one point maybe there were more sophisticated players in SFR, and not that there are a ton of sophisticated players, guys that and gals that know how to find a deal. Don't get me wrong, right? But then what I'm saying is now, just since there's so much competition, right, it's competing away the excess returns, and now those people are sort of leaking into the commercial real estate field to try to find those returns. And maybe, that's sort of what, from what I'm seeing, that's definitely driving up the price and driving down the returns of assets. And then basically, some people are failing out of these deals, right? And it does take a focus on, the tenant, the back end user, a good product to be able to be successful in the field. So I think that was well put by you, and it was a great perspective to share.
Will, can you buy a house? Well, it's different, but you're for example, can you buy a house that cash flows and you can actually make a decent buck?
You could, yeah, especially if interest rates fall. You get it now, refinance, probably cash flow a couple $100. I got a house in Spartanburg, right next to Greenville, where you're doing all these deals.
I just submitted an offer on a Spartanburg property today.
I love Sparkle City, and that house makes me a little bit of money every month.
Nice.
On paper, it's done very well. I
Good.
fell into that one. It was my primary residence, and I needed to leave, and I wasn't going to sell it, so found a tenant.
Nice job.
Took a little while, but had to replace the condensing unit for like $8,000.
Oh,
Yeah, that'll do it. Downtown Spartanburg is revitalizing. I mean,
It's right downtown.
Oh, is it? Oh my gosh! Well, then,
It's like a quarter mile from the baseball stadium.
oh my gosh! Well, they're going to deliver that baseball stadium Q2 of this year,
Yep.
and no, good for you for jumping on that gold mine. It's so cool what Spartanburg has done and continues to do, and then Greenville, obviously. I mean, that's been a massive kind of redevelopment for a city, and I mean, it's part of the reason we're pursuing it. So good for you.
But I think Spartanburg's using the Greenville playbook.
that's right.
They're redoing downtown right now. I believe they went through the master plan process last year, making it more pedestrian friendly, keeping the cars out of there. So
Yeah,
hope to see great things.
yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Hey, Will, do you have anything to note as far as, where you think we are in the market cycle, or what trends you're noticing right now?
In ski towns, I think we're at a very dangerous tipping point. It's a tale of two cities. You got the folks that this is their second, third, fourth, fifth home out here, and they enjoy coming out here because of the environment, visiting their favorite restaurants. But wages have stayed stagnant, and it's become an unaffordable place to live for those workers. And if the communities don't rally around and do something about the affordable housing crisis out here, these ski towns are going to lose their charm and their appeal for why people invested out here in the first place.
So what will educate me on this? Because like I know this is happening in Jackson Hole, for example, same kind of concept. I mean, the closest town is like Driggs outside of Jackson Hole, 30, 45 minutes, right? That's the most affordable thing. So all these workers have to come in every morning, and if the pass is closed, they're screwed. So I've heard this story. So what happens when the wages don't grow like they haven't, and it's gotten too expensive? Like,
People leave.
okay, so primary residence leave, or the second homeowner, the homeowner where it's his third home, they sell their like.
Uh, so the way I see it unfolding is the people that keep the town running, the people that plow the streets, the people that service all the underground utilities, your service workers, your hotel staff. Those people are going to chase other opportunities elsewhere in the country, and then the second homeowners, when they come out here, they realize their favorite restaurant's been shut down. Their friends can't go stay at the hotel when they're in town visiting. And then it loses the appeal and their investment becomes significantly impacted.
Mm.
So would the only solution, not the only solution, that's an exaggeration, I guess, but like if wages grew to where people could afford to live there, is that the saving grace?
There is no inventory of housing. These communities need to build more housing. And they're surrounded by U.S. Forest Service land. So it's going to
Mm.
be creative deals where you involve the U.S. Forest Service and you do land swaps. You go out and you buy a bunch of old mining claims and you swap them with the U.S. Forest Service that has more desirable developable land, where you can throw up a lot of density on one specific site and build a brand new community that'll house 350 people or have 350 units, house somewhere around 1,000 folks, and solve your problem for the next 10 years. And then you just repeat that over and over and over again.
Okay, because
Interesting.
I know, like in Jackson Hole, it's a big. I mean, it's a big deal in a lot of ski, wealthy ski towns, but it's a big deal there too.
But it's like here we have all this deed restricted housing, and these people bought it 20 years ago when it was first developed for 120K. Now they're trying to cash out and retire. They're sitting on the market at $750,000 because unless you own a business, you can't afford to buy that home at 750K. And there's only so
Right,
many businesses. So
right,
it's an interesting
right.
dynamic.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's an opportunity, I'd say. I don't
yeah.
know
Well,
if it's
yeah.
all that cool,
Yes, every problem is an opportunity.
Every
That is
problem's an
for
opportunity. I
sure.
like that. All right, awesome. Well, I think that we had a good base conversation. I just wanted to kind of end it on some basic career questions, and maybe we'll go around the horn for each of these. But Kevin, what would you say you're working on improving the most on your tool belt right now? Like, what skill set are you focused on at the moment?
That's a good question. I've actually been looking up like personal coaches for increasing my power of influence and like my communication abilities. Um, I'm a social guy. I can have a conversation, but you know, whenever I sit across the table from somebody who knows how to use their words, they know when to pause, they just know what to say, when to say it, how to say it, and they apply like technique to how they communicate. That like they command the room, and people listen to them.
Yeah,
And like you both know, in this business, you're constantly negotiating with everybody, and
that's right.
you're convincing so many people on a daily basis of certain things, right? Um, and if you don't have that ability to communicate with people and get your word heard, I mean, we all talk. Like I talk more than anybody. Well, I talk more than I should, but it doesn't mean anyone's listening to me, right? And so if if I could fine tune that skill set of speaking in a way where I'm heard, then I think it's a really powerful tool. I know it's a powerful tool because I know people who have that trait and they crush it. They crush it.
Right.
So
Right. Well, Kevin, if it means anything, I think that you're someone who people should listen to for sure.
thank
Um,
you.
but
Appreciate that.
obviously, always trying to work on improving your communication skills is definitely a positive. How about you, Will? Is there anything in your tool belt that you're working on at the moment?
Networking, getting more
Cool.
involved in the local community. It's a very small town, trying to source deals off market. So that's what I'm working on.
Right. So you're pounding the pavement more these days.
I am doing a lot more shaking hands
Yeah.
than babysitting contractors,
But kissing babies too.
of course.
Awesome. All right, Kevin, what is the most underrated skill in the industry?
The most underrated skill I would say is, gosh, I've got a couple answers
Yeah.
to this. Um, the ability to diffuse situations, and that's part of a communication thing too. Definitely ties into communication, but the ability to take a stressful situation or a situation where both parties are conflicting, there doesn't seem to be a middle ground, tensions are rising, and the ability to just bring it back to a level ground is a huge asset. I know people who have that skill, and I'm jealous of that skill.
Right.
I would also say it's oh, here's one, is to do what you say you're going to do. It is the simplest. I mean, I see this on podcasts too. It's so funny. I see it on podcasts and people talk about it, and but I know so many people who say they'll do something and they don't. And
Right.
I'm sure I'm guilty of forgetting to do something, but like if I have a task list, so I use like Outlook tasks, for example, and it might not be the most efficient thing to use, but I use it. And if I send you an email, Nick, I swear, I send you an email and I ask you for something, I go to my Outlook task, I drag the email in, and I say, "Has Nick responded to this?" And I set it for 2 days later. I do that for like every
Yeah.
email I send. No joke,
Yeah.
because I'm so busy, and
Right.
I'll forget.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, that's I mean, it's really not a difficult thing to do. Just
Yeah.
to say you're gonna do something, and then you do it. And if you don't do things because you're forgetting, well, then set a reminder for yourself and recognize that you're the kind of forgetful person because you're busy, and that's not a problem. And the most successful people I know are incredibly busy and forgetful, but they set reminders for themselves and they don't drop the ball.
Right.
And it's really not a difficult problem to solve.
Yeah.
And it's so funny how easy it is to stand out if you're one of those people who does what they say they're going to do, because there's so many people who don't do that.
Right.
So yeah, I get a little heated on that one.
No, no, yeah, no. To your point, Kevin, you sound familiar to me. It just sounds like you do it digitally. But we have at my office, I've got a glass board in my office, it's a big one, and I call it my brain because essentially every little task I've got a date for a follow up and all that stuff. Sounds similar to you. You use your computer for it, but I get what you're saying.
It's smart because it requires literally 5 seconds of your time, and the amount of deals you can win because of it, or just the amount of relationships you keep alive because of it, or whatever the benefit is. Like it's the risk reward. There's no risk, but the time spent doing it and the reward is astronomical.
That's right. That's right. What about you, Will? What do you think the most underrated skill in the industry is?
Uh, Instilling a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Yes,
You go out
yes,
there,
yes, yes.
you hire all these people, and it's just their job to go out there, and it's their 9 to 5. Like they don't really care. They're not taking it home with them. They're not thinking about it. There's got to be somebody to drive the ship. and have that sense of urgency. Like let's get things done, guys.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I
Yeah.
totally agree. I probably agree more than I should because I probably apply urgency to things that I don't need to apply urgency to. But I I think it's so important to like. I just read something, and I've always believed that time kills deals, which is true. But I read something recently that said speed wins deals, and that's the mindset that needs to be had. Is you move faster, you just act like it's important. I mean, because it is important. Act like it's important and get it done. If it takes you five, and it's. I'm rambling, but
No, you're
I agree
not.
with you, Will. I agree.
No, yeah, that's great. Just move with urgency. I think you literally, I read your website earlier, and that's like in your philosophy is to act with urgency. And I
Yeah,
think that's important.
for sure.
All right, jumping back, wanted to jump to you first, Kevin. What keeps you motivated?
Oh, what keeps me motivated? I've been motivated my entire life, but that does not mean that I don't get like down on myself. My wife, actually, she is my biggest cheerleader, I would say.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is pretty cool to say. She is the main reason that I felt confident enough to go off on my own and leave my job and yeah, so she's a big attribute to it, and I've always wanted to make money and have a flexible lifestyle. I've always wanted to be able to do what I wanted to do, not do the whole 8 to 5. I don't mind working 8 to 5, right? It's not that. I mean, I work a lot of hours, but it's the consistent. Yeah,
You're investing now to have a good work life balance later.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, right.
exactly.
What
So,
about you, Will?
I'm gonna have to say a sense of pride in what you do.
Yeah,
Taking pride in getting up every day, and some days are easier than others, but you got to stick in the fight and see it through.
that's right. Yeah, good to hear. All right, last question. Kev, what advice do you have for someone looking to enter the industry or start a business of their own today?
I would say take the leap. People are so scared. People get so used to the paycheck, the reliable paycheck, and I get that. Like if you're in a situation where you're not making a lot of money and you're paycheck to paycheck, I understand that. And I was fortunate enough to have done decent, and I didn't have that pressure. But people place this I would say it's not value, but people put this pressure on going off on your own in terms of like just I'm leaving this income and when am I going to get my next paycheck and what's going to happen. And I'm like, if you've got discipline and you've been successful in either climbing the ladder or making money or whatever it is, I mean, you're going to do just fine. You're going to do fine. Oh, and by the way, the pressure is actually more significant because now you've quit your job and you might have a kid on the way. You got a family, so light a fire in your ass. But
That one hits home, doesn't it?
yeah, it does hit home. It does. But I don't know. People commend me for going off on my own and doing my own thing with my partner, and I appreciate that. I certainly appreciate that. You know, it wasn't as hard as people make it out to be. And now, granted, I was lucky enough where when I was a broker, I was an independent contractor. So I hung my license with AY, but like I didn't feel like I worked for them. I had my partner and we had our thing going and it felt like we worked for ourselves and ran our own business, right? So I've already felt like I run my own business. I was an independent contractor and I was 100% commission. So I was already pretty much doing the same thing. And
Right.
so I was already comfortable enough with taking that leap.
Yeah.
Um, and what I encourage people to do is just like, if you think you want to run your business one day, get enough knowledge, you know, to where you'll never have enough to feel like you're ready. So that's a tough thing to say for me, I guess. But like, just take the freaking leap and Yeah, and just do it, and it'll work out. I mean, if you are a hard worker and you treat people well and people like you, it will work out every single time. It will. I promise it will. So I'm confident that it'll work out for me. I hope that I don't experience too many headwinds. I'm sure I will. But
Yeah.
so that's my advice.
Well, and I tell you what, Kevin, from your words, it also sounds like you're also someone who's willing to always learn, and that's important. Important to us because that's why we started this podcast. You know, I'm sure I went to grad school with Will, and we started this podcast to be able to keep learning and keep kind of engaging in these conversations that introduce new topics to us, or stuff that we can grab onto, and that's the purpose of everything. It sounds like you have kind of a desire to keep learning at each step of the phase. You don't jump in without understanding, hey, look, I'm new to this, I've got to learn this and that, and whatever.
And real quick too, important you say that too, because I don't watch the news a ton. I read the news more so. So I try and cut out the bias, and I try and just read what's happening and
Yeah.
the effect that it has in the world and stuff like that. But it is important. It's effective. The more you know, the more conversations you can have, and the more you can contribute to conversations, even if it's a random fact. If it's a random fact, right? If you're talking with somebody at the bar, you can contribute. Or if they're talking about something, no matter what it is, and you've read the news this morning, or you for the last 20 years have just read the news and you've learned little bits and pieces about random freaking things, and you can contribute to that conversation because of that little piece of knowledge you have, right? You don't know what that can bring to a relationship and conversation, and how it compounds, right? So just
Right.
having knowledge, and just being open to educating yourself continuously, like every day, it's really important, right? I mean, it has put me in positions that I would not otherwise be in if I just didn't know random things.
Yeah. No, I get it. No, I agree with you on that. I can't say it any better. Well, yeah. What about you, Will? Wanted to ask you this. I don't know if you were expecting this question today, but what advice do you have for someone looking to enter in the industry the way you have and take on a development role, a role like you have?
Um, I'd say understand what your strengths are. There's lots of different facets of development, whether you're a financial whiz, you understand the construction side of things, you're a land guy, you're a deal guy. Figure out what your strengths are, play to them, and stay in the fight long enough where your weaknesses will one day become your strengths.
Man, a few words, but they're always hard hitting. I appreciate it, Will. Um, yeah, that's about it, guys. We've gone. We've spoken for a long time today, so let's wrap it up.
This is definitely the longest pod.
Yeah.
I think it was great.
Well, hopefully that's a good thing.
All right, guys, that's all the time that we have for today. Big thank you to Kevin Hann for joining. We do have a plan we're discussing. I'd like him to get involved in this podcast. So, fortunately for our listeners, we'll be able to hear a lot more of him coming up. Thanks again, Kevin. And also, thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. You can contact us at contact@bywpodcast.com and find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. And we're looking to get on other platforms soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, thanks for tuning in to Building Your World.